Did the New York City Police Department really prove that Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid by using forensics technology? I get questions like this all the time, and if it's not the NYPD, it's the CIA or the FBI or Interpol or some other official sounding group. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but no, none of those agencies have ever conducted a photo comparison study or any type of investigation into Billy the Kid and Brushy Bill Roberts. It has never happened. Now, that said, most of the time when someone brings up Billy the Kid and the NYPD, what they're referring to is a documentary produced by Dan Edwards titled Billy the Kid, the Silver City Photo. I'll drop a link down below if you'd like to check it out for yourself. But the documentary is mostly centered around a newly discovered photograph that allegedly depicts Billy the Kid over in Silver City, New Mexico. Now, I personally happen to disagree, but that's neither here nor there. What really caught my attention, and what I'd like to discuss today, is one of the methods that Mr. Edwards used to authenticate the photo, along with several other photos also featured in the documentary. And I say method, but really I'm just referring to one person, a detective by the name of Michael Furia. He's described in the documentary as a, quote, facial recognition expert currently employed by the New York City Police Department in their facial recognition unit. The narrator, who in this case happens to be the great Emilio Estevez, then goes on to state that Furia is a world-leading forensics artist who used modern forensic techniques to match the Silver City photo to other known photos of the subjects it contains. We'll get to that in just a few minutes, but either way, I think we can all agree that Detective Furia has some pretty impressive credentials. I also think that when a man of his caliber speaks, it's worth paying attention. This isn't just some random wacko on YouTube or some conspiracy theorist, okay? This is a highly trained, highly experienced member of law enforcement. So let's hear him out, and let's start with what he actually did versus what people seem to think that he did. You see, in the Silver City documentary, at around 23 minutes, Detective Furia is presented with 6 photographs and told that they all depict the same person at different stages of his life, so different ages. And by the way, these are all supposed to be pictures of Brushy Bill Roberts. He's never told that's who it is, but 2 of them are definitely Brushy when he's an older man. One of the other photos is of a child, one looks to be a teenager, another is allegedly Brushy when he was 27, and the final image is of a guy wearing a cowboy hat who appears to be in his 40s. Detective Furia then analyzes all 6 photos, comparing them to the Silver City photo, and states that he's, quote, highly confident that is the same person. In other words, all 7 of them are a match. Skip ahead 10 minutes later, at around the 34-minute mark, and that's when Furia is shown the famous tintype of Billy the Kid, which he also compares to the Silver City photo that he previously matched the 6 alleged photos of Brushy Bill Roberts to. And I want to be very careful here. I don't want to misrepresent anybody, but I should also note that at no point in the documentary does Detective Furia just flat out state that the man in the Silver City photo is Billy the Kid. Nor does he ever claim that Brushy Bill Roberts is Billy the Kid. What he does do, however, is spend the next few minutes pointing out various similarities between the Silver City photo and the Billy the Kid tintype, all while saying stuff like, I'm comfortable with this and everything's consistent. And then when he's asked if he thinks it would be highly likely that both photos depict the same person, Furia eventually responds by saying, quote, yeah, looks pretty good. I like it. I do like it. End of quote. So although he never just comes right out and declares the photos to be a match, that's certainly the impression that he's given off. Like I said, there's a link down below. Watch it for yourself. Let me know your opinion. But I don't think I'm too far off base by saying that Furia seems to believe that the photos are a match. Or at the very least, he's leaning heavily in that direction. Okay, so just to very quickly sum things up, to this point at least, and don't worry, this will all make sense here in just a few minutes, but Furia was given 6 photos, and he's told they all depict the same person. He then matches all 6 of those photos to the Silver City photo, stating that he's highly confident they're all the same person. And then just 10 minutes later, he strongly hints that the Silver City photo matches the Billy the Kid tintype. Therefore, Brushy Bill Roberts is Billy the Kid. Case closed, end of story. Now that last part was all me. Detective Furia never actually says that Roberts was Billy the Kid. But hey, if my inbox is any indication, or if the comments on my YouTube videos are any indication, that's certainly what a lot of people took from his analysis. Now I say all that to say this. If you actually watch the documentary, which I hope you do, you'll notice that there's no fancy software or technology or algorithms or anything like that being put to use. Instead, all we have is just one man using nothing more than his eyeballs and then offering up an opinion. That's it. And we know that to be the case because Detective Furia explicitly states as much right here on YouTube on his own channel in a video titled Billy the Kid. His disclaimer, which is posted in the video description, reads as follows: "My opinions are my own and do not reflect the opinions of my employer. This project was for entertainment purposes only and was originally explained to be a genealogy project of subjects I had no knowledge of. I was not paid for the photo analysis done. All analysis was on my own time, and I am not employed by author Dan Edwards. A possible match does not mean it is a positive match. It is simply a belief or hypothesis based on experience and training. This was in no way a full investigation. I was given multiple photos, but not all available photos. Comparing historical photos is not the same as identifying live criminals against a repository. My employer's practices do not include one-to-one photo comparison. No facial recognition technology of any kind was used in the comparison of the photos. My beliefs are based solely on my experience." End of quote. So by Detective Furia's own admission, not only did he not use any facial recognition technology, and not only does his own department not even do one-to-one photo comparisons, so I don't really know where the experience comes into play, but he also states that his findings were nothing more than an opinion and that a possible match is not the same as a positive match. And just to be clear, I don't have an issue with Detective Furia, okay? I'm also not trying to discredit him. He was asked to look at some photos and give his opinion. That's exactly what he did. I got no problem with that whatsoever. And then, cherry on top, he goes the extra mile on his own channel to give further clarification. So no, the NYPD has never, ever conducted a photo comparison analysis of Billy the Kid and Brushy Bill Roberts. Sure, one of their employees offered up his opinion, but he certainly didn't use any technology other than the eyeballs that God gave him. And really, man, this just goes back to what I've said on numerous occasions. There's a reason why provenance or chain of ownership is so important when it comes to authenticating these old photos. Our eyes are far from perfect. In fact, study after study has already proven that what we as humans process up in our noggins ain't always an accurate depiction of what we're looking at. Mostly due to our brains being wired to find patterns, even when those patterns aren't really there. It's called pareidolia. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it's the same reason why people see Jesus on a piece of toast or the Virgin Mary in a water stain. You stare at two old photographs long enough, especially when you want them to be the same person, your brain will invariably start filling in the gaps. Maybe their eyes have the same intensity, or their chins are shaped the same way, or they're wearing similar hats, and pretty soon you've convinced yourself that you've cracked the case, when in reality all you've done is what we humans do best: see what we want to see. That's why scientists rely on measurements and methodologies as opposed to gut feelings or instincts. Anyway, just because we can't trust our eyes, that doesn't mean we can't trust the technology, right? Right? Well, once again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the technology that we actually do need to accurately compare two old photographs and determine whether or not they're the same person doesn't really exist, at least not yet. And it certainly doesn't exist in the way people seem to think that it exists. This stuff is not magic. The facial recognition software that we do have, even the cutting-edge stuff used by the NYPD, it was built for one specific job. And that job is to take a high-resolution photograph and match it against a database of other high-resolution photographs. Mugshots, passports, driver's licenses, stuff like that. Not 19th century tintypes. You gotta think, man, modern digital photos, they contain millions of pixels of facial detail. Whereas a scanned tintype from the 1880s might have a fraction of that. And a good chunk of what's there isn't even real facial information. It's chemical artifacts or scratches or just dust that's been built up for over a century. Meanwhile, the software doesn't know the difference between a wrinkle on the face and a scratch on the plate. It's all just data. You also got to consider stuff like shadows or the lack of color and the harsh lighting, all of which can drastically hinder the results when it comes to facial recognition. The closest thing that I'm aware of that actually semi-works on these old pictures is a tool called the Civil War Photo Sleuth, originally designed over at Virginia Tech. And even then, it doesn't really work the way most people assume. All the facial recognition software does is just narrow down a list of candidates. And once that's accomplished, a human steps in to make the actual identification, using everything from uniforms to service records, and yes, even provenance. According to the guy who created it, Kurt Luther, a match in the system is simply a starting point. Quote, "While computer algorithms can filter out noise and highlight the best options, only humans can provide the careful analysis and synthesis required for an airtight identification." In other words, a match in the system is nothing more than a lead. And guess what? The same exact thing applies to the NYPD. Per their own internal documents, quote, "The facial recognition process does not by itself establish probable cause to arrest or obtain a search warrant, but it may generate investigative leads through a combination of automated biometric comparisons and human analysis." So even with a match, a real detective still has to go out knocking on doors and collecting evidence. Just because somebody dings in the system doesn't mean they just automatically go to prison. Hell, it doesn't even mean they're arrested. It is just a lead. And that's with modern high-resolution images. It's still not perfect. So why on earth would you want to use it with 19th century tintypes? It just boggles the mind. Of course, it doesn't really matter because, like I said a few minutes ago, Detective Furia, by his own admission, didn't even use the technology. Now, I suppose there's an argument to be made that maybe with a guy like Detective Furia, maybe he's so experienced and so well-trained that he's just better than the technology. Maybe he's so good that he really can just reliably eyeball these photos and determine what's what. And yeah, maybe. I have no doubt that the man's good at his job. But the unfortunate truth, and once again, I am not saying this to single out Detective Furia, but the unfortunate truth is that he did make a mistake during the documentary. And it's a pretty glaring mistake, in my opinion at least. Remember those 6 images that were supposed to show Brushy Bill Roberts at various stages of his life? The ones that Detective Furia was highly confident were of the same person? Well, as it turns out, they don't all really depict Brushy Bill Roberts. Namely this guy. Allow me to introduce William Dibrell Wood. Now, this image of Wood was initially taken up in Long Island sometime in the fall of 1898 after the Rough Riders returned from Cuba. You can find the same picture in Teddy Roosevelt's book, The Rough Riders, in which he calls Wood out by name, praising his talents. The only thing is, the image itself isn't labeled with names, at least not in the book. The caption simply reads, 5 Bronco Busters. Now, I did do a little bit of extra digging, and thankfully the negatives do still exist. And not only do they still exist, but the original sleeves containing the negatives were labeled with the names of all the men featured in the photo. In fact, there's actually 2 photos of Wood, and they're both labeled. Shout out to the nice folks over at Harvard's Houghton Library for sending me links to the digitalized copies. I was also able to find an additional photo of Wood, circa 1905, as part of the Leora Wood Werner collection. William Wood was not an alias used by Brushy Bill Roberts, nor is he an obscure figure. In fact, his life is pretty well documented. You can find him in Colorado in 1880, working as a cowboy. He'd marry at least twice, get divorced, serve with Roosevelt over in Cuba, and eventually put down roots in Cochise County, Arizona. We have newspaper articles, census records, city directories, and even an obituary showing not only that William D. Wood served with the Rough Riders, but that he was his own person who lived his own life completely separate from Brushy Bill Roberts. Hell, even Brushy Bill admitted to living in Texas during the same years you can find Wood over in Arizona. But for whatever reason, Detective Furia was highly confident that Wood matched the photos of Brushy Bill as an old man. He also seemed confident that Wood matched the guy in the Silver City photo, which he would later compare to the tintype of Billy the Kid. Now, in Furia's defense, he was sort of misled that all 6 pictures were of the same person, and I do take him at his word that he didn't know the project had anything to do with the famous outlaw. As far as he was aware, he was just working on a genealogy project and offering his opinion. If this was an actual investigation, I have no doubt at all that Detective Furia would have gathered additional evidence, chain of custody, corroborating records, stuff like that. And sir, if you happen to stumble upon this video and you think I've misrepresented your role in the documentary, or if I've gotten anything wrong and you just want to clear the air, please do not hesitate to email me at josh@wildwestextra.com. If I've made any mistakes, I am more than willing to offer up a correction in a future video. And the same thing goes for Dan Edwards. This is not meant to be a hit piece on Edwards. It's also not my way of bashing his documentary. Like I said earlier, I get this question at least a couple of times a week. So all I'm doing today is just answering the many inquiries I've gotten in regard to the Silver City documentary, namely the New York City Police Department's role. And from now on, I can just point people to this video and be done with it. I won't have to keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. Now, before we go, I'd like to also take a brief look at the study conducted back in 1990, another facial recognition study that supposedly resulted in Brushy Bill and Billy the Kid being a 93% match. Matter of fact, according to the Brushy Bill Wikipedia page, the guys who conducted the study concluded that the result proved, quote, beyond the shadow of a doubt that Billy the Kid and Brushy Bill Roberts were the same person, end of quote. By the way, I have no idea why this is the case, but for some reason, a lot of people were under the impression that this 1990 study was conducted by the FBI, which is why I'm bringing it up today, but it was not, okay? It was conducted at the University of Texas by Professors Alan Bovick and Scott Acton. The FBI had absolutely nothing to do with it, and it most certainly did not result in a positive match. And no, neither of the professors said that it proved that Billy and Brushy were the same person. That is also untrue. This next part's going to be somewhat anecdotal, as I don't really feel comfortable releasing private emails, but I have spoken personally to both of the professors, and when I asked Bovick if he thought Brushy and Billy were a close match, he responded in part by saying, "We found nothing conclusive and felt that the claim was dubious." Now, when I asked the same of Mr. Acton, he was a bit more pointed, stating, quote, "I believe that Brushy Bill Roberts and Billy the Kid were not the same person." Now, full disclosure, I'm not the only one who's reached out to these guys. There was actually a user on the Brushy Bill Pro Boards forum by the name of Clyde C., who spoke with the professors way back in 2017. And according to Clyde, Professor Bovick said that the results were misstated and that they came to, quote, "no positive conclusion," which was pretty consistent with what he told me just a few years later. I know I'm sort of asking you to take my word for it, or to take Clyde's word for it, some random guy on an internet forum, and I know that's not exactly the greatest of sources, but then again, I was able to find a working email for Bovick in less than 5 minutes, and I'm sure you can do the same thing, so go ahead and ask him for yourself, see what he says. I know when I contacted him back in, I think it was 2023, neither he or Acton were interested in coming on the show, but I am going to keep pestering them, so hopefully at some point we can get one of them at least to come on here and spill the tea. Because it really is an interesting story. Just from what little I know about it, apparently there was a bit of drama surrounding the study, and it resulted in a certain author that I shall not name being reported. And no, I am not referring to Dan Edwards. But yeah, at the end of the day, you just got to ask yourself one simple question. Why is it that this study is not publicly available? People cite it all the time, but nobody's ever actually seen it. I mean, hell, it was conducted over 30 years ago, so why can't we see the results? Where's the report? Where's the data? Where's the write-up showing the methodology? Now, I personally don't really care about any of these studies. I think they're all flawed, as I've already demonstrated. The technology just isn't there yet. But I will tell you this. You show me some actual proof that Brushy Bill was who he said he was, or that Billy the Kid lived to be an old man, and I'll scream it from the rooftops. I do not want Garrett to have killed Billy the Kid. I can't say it any plainer than that. I wish Billy lived to be an old man. That'd be one of the greatest stories of all time. Unfortunately, though, the evidence just doesn't support it. So just to sum everything up, don't believe everything you see on the internet. No, the FBI did not prove that Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid, and neither did the NYPD. Sure, one of their employees offered up an opinion, but he did so without using any forensics technology of any sort, and in the process, he misidentified one of the subjects of the study. And he also stated that it was a possible match, which in the world of forensics is nothing more than an investigative lead. Detectives still have to go out knocking on doors, collecting statements, and looking at the evidence. And the evidence, as far as Billy the Kid is concerned, all points to him dying at Fort Sumner at the hands of Pat Garrett. There was a coroner's inquest, there was a public wake, a public funeral. Multiple people who knew Billy the Kid confirmed casting eyes on his dead body. And then there's the evidence concerning Brushy Bill Roberts. Much like with William Wood, we have census records, we got family records, and even a World War I draft registration, all showing that he was a mere toddler when the real Billy the Kid was killed over at Fort Sumner. And just to be completely transparent, I'm not mad at anybody for believing in Brushy Bill Roberts, okay? If that's what you're into, God bless. I want you to be happy. But please, at the very least, I think you should recognize that what you're doing is just trying to reverse engineer history. You ignore the legit documentation and sources, and you replace them with anecdotal stories and shady forensics. Which, once again, that's fine. That's what you're into. Go ahead and knock yourself out. But just don't act like you're studying history. All you're doing at best is writing historical fan fiction. And I guess that's about all I've got on Billy the Kid and the NYPD. I'd like to extend a big thank you and shout out to Ben Doss and James Townsend for helping me to track down a few of these sources. I also received a lot of help from Corey Recco. And if you're not familiar with Corey, he's one hell of a researcher. He's done a lot of work on some of these fake photos floating around, and he's also a pretty damn good author. I would definitely recommend his books on the Colfax County War and the disappearance of Albert Jennings Fountain. He's also done quite a lot of work for the Wild West History Association. As for Dawson Townsend, I don't think these guys need an introduction, but they probably know more about Billy the Kid than most people who have ever lived. And you can find them both over at the Forever West YouTube channel, where they're currently doing a series on the Mad Trapper Albert Johnson. They also have an excellent series on a lesser-known lawman by the name of John Swain, guy whose picture is oftentimes mistaken for Jesse Evans. These guys are really good at what they do, all three of them, and their work is all backed up by historical sources. So I do hope you check them out. All right, and until next time, adios.